Hello everybody. In this video we're going to take a look at Molinism. This is not going to be a robust case for Molinism. It's just going to take a basic look at it. And Molinism is the third option in the Calvinist versus Arminius debate. A lot of the Calvinists in Arminius on YouTube don't seem to realize that there is a third option. The way that they talk about it, they always seem to think that the other option is the only other option. Well, that's not the case. There is a third option. And it's interesting to me because both Calvinism and Arminianism are both supported very well by the Bible, at least to some extent. Arminians are correct. Human persons do have free will in the Bible. And Calvinists are correct. God is in complete and full control in the Bible. So how do both go together? Well, Molinism explains that rather wonderfully. Now, it should be stated that Molinism was started by a Catholic Jesuit. So people will reject it automatically based on that. And if you do so, well, that is called the genetic fallacy. And if you want to, hold to your theology because of a genetic fallacy, that's up to you. As again, I do believe that persons do have free will. But it doesn't matter where an idea, thought, or system comes from in terms of whether or not that thought, idea, or system is true or false, or good or bad. You have to judge it based on its own merit, not based on who presents it to you. And in this video, I'm going to be using a diagram, or a chart, I should say, from the book by Kenneth Keathley called Salvation and Sovereignty, a Molinist Approach. Alright, so here's the chart from Kenneth Keathley's book, and it's basically, as it says, Molinism in a nutshell. And what this actually shows is actually creation. This is a Molinist view of creation. And the first thing that'll probably alarm people would be the first moment, second moment, and third moment. That things are being placed in moments. These are not chronological sequences, but are rather logical sequences. All of this could have happened simultaneously. However, to understand it logically, these are the sequences they would go in terms of understanding it. So don't be alarmed by the fact that it says first moment, second moment, and third moment. And that there's something in between two moments, which, by the way, that's creation right there. That's the actualization of the world. Basically, the Molinist view takes God's knowledge and defines it in three ways, as natural knowledge, middle knowledge, and free knowledge. The reason why middle knowledge is called middle knowledge, and the word middle comes from, is because it's right in the middle of natural knowledge and free knowledge in the logical sequence. Okay, so you see God's natural knowledge. What is meant by that is God knows everything that could happen. God knows all possibilities. If you can imagine God prior to creation, I know the word prior doesn't really fit there because prior to creation there was no time, and prior indicates time. But anyway, you know what I'm saying. So prior to creation, without having created anything, God knows all possibilities of what he could create. And then the second moment, or second logical moment, God's middle knowledge. God knows everything that would happen based on what he would create. So God knows which possibilities are feasible. So he knows which worlds, all of the worlds that he could create, and then based on conditions in those worlds, what would happen and throughout history. And then out of all the worlds that God could create, God actualizes one of them, which you are currently living in, and then that world being actualized, we go to free knowledge, and that is that God knows everything that will happen. God exhaustively knows all things. So God knows everything that is going to happen and will happen because he actualized a particular world based on what he could make, and what would happen based on certain conditions in that world. So again, real quick, God knew all the worlds that he could create. He knew what would happen in each one. He picked one, and knows what will happen in the one that which he picked, which is the one you're living in. So let me explain why the titles real quick. Natural knowledge, the reason why that's called natural knowledge is because, well, God, by his very own nature, is omniscient. Middle knowledge is because it comes in between the two. And free knowledge is because the world at which God actualized, he was perfectly free to make. It wasn't contingent on anything. It wasn't based on human persons or whatever, because there was a potential infinite number of worlds God could have created, and God just picked one of them. So it was completely up to him as to which world was actualized. So God could have actually actualized a world in which Paul was disobedient to his call. As Paul says in Acts 26:19 that he was not disobedient to his call, God could have actualized a world in which Paul was disobedient to his call. So it was perfectly up to God, 100%, what world was actualized. So that's why that's called free knowledge. Now, the big question, of course, would be, does the Bible support any of this? And let's take a look at that. All right. So God's natural knowledge, everything that could happen. It's very difficult to show in the Bible that God knows all possibilities, because nowhere in the Bible does God list out all exhaustive, an exhaustive list of possibilities. So the all part has to be kind of assumed based on who we're talking about here, that being God, being omniscient. He must know all possibilities if he knows some possibilities. So I have two examples of here, and there's many more that can be shown in the Bible, of God knowing some possibilities. And I'll leave it up to you to pause the video and to read here. If you want to read or are interested, or just look up both scriptures yourself. And you'll see that God knows some possibilities, therefore it should be assumed that he knows all possibilities. Alright, so the next one would be middle knowledge. And does the Bible demonstrate middle knowledge? The answer is yes, and it does quite a bit. And these are just some of the examples of middle knowledge in action. Matthew 11:21-23 is an excellent example. I really like Romans 9:29 because it's right in the middle of the Calvinist most coveted piece of scripture, Romans 9. And middle knowledge is usually demonstrated in if-then type statements, which are normally called counterfactual statements because they counter what factually happened. For example, you could say if Adam and Eve had never eaten of the fruit, then they would still be in the garden. And that would be a counterfactual statement. That does seem to have some truth to it, obviously. And you actually use middle knowledge throughout your life all the time. So, like, say, for example, you're late for work, then you start thinking about everything, all the events that just occurred, and you say, well, if this, then that, if this, then that, and that's middle knowledge. If you had made it to the oven on time, then you would not have burnt your brownies or whatever, that kind of stuff. So middle knowledge is actually quite common throughout all of our lives. And of course, the last one is free knowledge. God knows everything that will happen, and that should be obvious. I shouldn't even have to show any scripture because what is the Bible if it is not a series of books that demonstrate prophecy? So it's quite obvious that God knows what will happen. So God knows all that could happen, all that would happen based on certain conditions, and all that will happen. That be that. So hopefully I have some time left on this video to look at man's free will. Does man have free will? The answer is obviously yes, if you read the Bible. Because there are conditional statements throughout the Bible that very much demonstrate man's free will. There are other events in the Bible that also demonstrate it, but the conditional statements very much demonstrate it. And here I have 4 examples for you, and I want to look at one of them, Deuteronomy 11:26-27. In Deuteronomy 11:26-27 and 28, it actually says, look, today I am giving you the choice between a blessing and a curse. You will be blessed if you obey the commands of the Lord your God, and you will be cursed if you reject the commands of the Lord your God, is basically what it says. If man does not have free will, as the Calvinist wants you to believe, then these conditional statements are nothing short of an act of cruelty on God's part. This is the equivalent of you telling a child, if you wash your hands, then you may eat dinner. If you do not wash your hands, then I'm going to beat you, and then not allow access to water and soap for that child. Now, a Calvinist response to this may be, but wait a minute, the Bible clearly tells us that God is in control of all things. Well, that's absolutely true. It does. And God is in control of all things. You see, on the Molinist view, God created a very particular world. And in that particular world at which God actualized, and you're living in, is a world in which certain persons do obey God's command freely, and certain persons don't. God could have actualized a world in which other persons obey his command and other persons don't. So persons who find themselves obeying God's command are doing so because God actualized a world in which they do. God could have actualized a world in which they don't. So God was and is completely in control of the world that we are actually in. I'm going to go ahead and end this video with an old Molinist saying, and if you're confused at this point about what Molinism has to say, then you're going to really be confused from this. It is up to God whether we find ourselves in a world in which we are predestined. It is up to us whether we are predestined in the world we find ourselves in. Thanks for watching. God bless, and have a good day.